in spring of 2018. But when it started then, it was just kind of us starting to think about a lot of the things that you're all thinking about. So what started it was the mayor decided that he created Democracy NYC, which may be a program that you're familiar with.
Is anyone familiar with Democracy NYC? By show of hands?
Yes, I see a little bit of both. So Democracy NYC was Mayor de Blasio's plan to strengthen access to democracy for all New Yorkers, not just students. And so he has 10 points, and a lot of them are involving having more translators at whole sites, and like different things to make access to democracy easier for everyone, regardless of their age. So one of the things that's on there is something called Civics for All. And so at the time, it was just kind of like, hey, DOE, social studies people, there are 3 of us on the social studies team who make decisions about social studies for the city. Can you create this thing, this Civics for All thing? And so we said yes, but then we had to kind of stop and think about what does that mean? If we want civics for all of our students, what should it look like? And so to the point that you were making a little bit earlier, I can't see your name tag, but if you bring the point that you were making a little bit earlier, Carla, was that we realized our social studies curriculum was very based in foundations and having students understand that like, this is how the government started, this is why the government started, but we weren't doing at all, not even just not a good enough job, we weren't at all really talking to students about what that means to you now and how you can be actively engaged now. So the example I always use is that there was a lesson plan in 2nd grade for our 2nd graders on the election process, which fine, right? Like 2nd graders should know that voting happens. They don't need to like break down everything about the voting process and think that like when I'm 18, then I can participate in democracy, because they can participate in it now. They're 7, they're 8, there are things they can do in their community. And so what we decided to do was kind of run with that idea. So what does it mean for you all to be engaged in democracy now? So this guide,
don't leave home without that in your backpack.
Yeah, right.
Wow.
There's 2 of them. There's a part 1 and a part 2. I can't call all of your schools and say, hey, like, why don't your students know about Civics for All? But you can maybe ask your social studies teacher where this thing is, and if like they have looked at it, if it's something they're interested in knowing more about. Yes.
So the school that is participating is it Civics for All, like all of
every school? So
has
every
that
school in the DOE from kindergarten to 12th grade, all 1,800. And so this is public schools. So I know some people in here are in charter schools or private schools, but all
No, it's all public.
Okay, all NYC DOE schools have received this. They've received a couple of copies depending on how big your school is. And then they received a letter with it that said that they could order more. And so this is just one part of a big initiative that we have that is Civics for All, but the biggest piece is the curriculum piece. So it addresses some of the things that I think you all are looking for is, what does it mean to me in high school specifically? How can I be a voter if I don't know what that means, right? If I don't know what I'm voting about or what I'm thinking about, but it also addresses a variety of other issues. So just in general, how am I an active and engaged person who's living in the community that I'm living in now? So all of our students have one thing in common. You all live here in New York, so it's very New York centric. But it requires really for you guys to bring your experiences into the classroom with your teachers. So that's one thing. I can, pass that around for you to look at. Yeah.
So is that like mandatory for them to actually read it through?
So that's a great question, and that kind of addresses the first question you all have over there. So
do all schools in New York State provide adequate civic education for those who can't see it?
So everybody in that campaign should be taking notes too. Like you guys should be taking notes. Because this is good information and good data.
And I will try not to get too boring and to give you some other ideas too. I'll get to your question in just a second with the answer. So it gets a little into the weeds of data, so I will try to explain it and try to stay with me. But in general, New York City does not have what we call a curriculum mandate, which means because we are a city of 1.1 million students in 1,800 schools, what one classroom needs is very different than what another classroom needs. And what one school needs is very different than what another school needs. So New York City does not say, here's a curriculum that you need to teach. What they do say is that you have to follow the rules that are made by New York State about curriculum. And so New York State has their state standards. So civics lives until now only in the social studies framework. So the New York State has a social studies framework. It says that civics has to be taught. That's why you guys in 12th grade take participation in government. So New York City kind of took a few steps ahead of New York State and started to create a civics curriculum that could be used in other subject areas by teachers so that they could incorporate it into the things that they're already teaching to you, if that makes sense. So because it is the only civics curriculum that New York City gives out to all schools, it is very highly suggested that they use it, and that they use it across grades K to 12, but we can't say like, you must use this thing. What's great about New York State making the rules is that New York State is just now catching up to this idea that like civics is really important and needs to be happening more in schools and be happening more comprehensively and more in that like current events, real life way that you were talking about. And so they brought together a task force of adults from around the state who are making new standards about civics. And so hopefully the recommendations of the task force have been that these kinds of things will become a requirement. But the state has to make that decision before the city can do it.
Okay.
Does that answer your question? In
Yeah.
kind of like a long, complicated way.
Yeah.
Do you have a follow-up? You want to think about it for a minute?
Yeah. I'll take it.
You had your hand up over here.
Shoshana?
You answered my
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I have a follow-up.
Sure.
So how long would it take for like it to officially go into like effect if everyone does approve it?
So New York State right now brought the recommendations of the task force to the Board of Regents. So you know you take your Regents exam, the Board of Regents are the people who like make those decisions. The Board of Regents then takes that recommendation from the task force and they're the ones who get to make a decision. Right now it's open for public comment. And so the public gets to say like, yes, we think this is good, no, we think that's not great. Ideally, this would be something that would come down from the state sooner rather than later, but we don't have an official timeline. But for New York City, again, because we try to like stay a few steps ahead of what the state is doing. So there are 3 people from my office who are on that task force, and we go up there and kind of bring this and say like, maybe you guys should think about doing something like this. So it's here in the city, and I can show you the rest of the resources that can be in your schools or that you guys can get online too. Yeah.
So the state, the DOE, they choose to refer back to the curriculum set by the state, or they have to refer back to?
New York City has to follow what the state says they have to do, but that leaves a lot of openness. So New York State says you have to teach social studies, ELA, math, science, like that. But then the city gets to decide more specifically. They get to flesh it out a little bit more.
Sorry, so there's
No, don't be sorry.
there's no possibility of like a mandatory thing set by the city that isn't set by the state?
For curriculum, no.
But I don't know if I'm understanding your question right. The city could choose to do something that the state hasn't mandated. They just couldn't mandate it. Yeah.
That was my
Right, so that's what Civics
Yeah.
for All is. It's like strongly suggested, and also something that I think I struggle on a daily basis with understanding and get reminded about by the adults around me all the time, is I, like, with a team of teachers, spent a lot of time on it, and then was like, so everyone knows about it, everyone's using it, isn't this wonderful? And it's a system of 1,800 schools and 1.1 million students, and so it takes a little time for it to roll out, which I'm being impatient about. I also think you guys should be impatient about, because while I have 3 years to like roll it out, you only have the amount of time you have in high school. So I get it, and I think you guys are doing a great job, and I can share some more stuff with you. Yeah.
Like, I don't know if this is like possible, if it could happen, but I feel like for seniors, especially like seniors in second half of senior year, you know, like they're not doing as much in school, you know, like they have less like to do in school. So I feel like, would it be possible for maybe like you to take like you know, like that's like a citywide thing for like all like second, like so like for all seniors in their social study classes to like actually like register like in class, you know, like, because I feel like that way they don't have to go out of their way to do it. It's just like in class they have nothing else to do, you know.
Yeah.
Second semester civic action project.
So you're talking about they have to register. You're talking about registering to vote, or you're talking about
Like since like with pre-registering, like we were talking about, like
Yeah.
you know, all seniors are like 6 or like at least 17 years old, you know. So I feel like, you know, in class, if you could just like set aside some time, you know, people have already gotten into colleges, you know, like there's not as much to learn like in the actual curriculum of history.
Yeah.
So you could just like, you know, set aside like maybe a few class periods and people could just register or pre-register.
So
There's
a few
complications.
things. Sorry, did you wanna?
I was just thinking, like, there's complications with that because of people who are like undocumented or like in the process of becoming documented or are on visas. So like, I that's not something schools can really require.
You're
That's
absolutely
my
right,
understanding.
and that was going to be my response as well. So what we do try to do, for years there's been Student Voter Registration Day, which over the last 2 years has kind of combined with Civics for All to become Civics Week, which is next week, for those of you who may not know. And so the goal of Civics Week is to register as many students as possible. So to give high schools the materials they need to register students, but also to give them guidance so that that doesn't happen, because we have to be very aware of the fact that not every student in every classroom is eligible to register to vote. And also we have to be respectful of the fact that as much as I think it's important, obviously this is my job, right, that everyone who is eligible registers, not everyone chooses to, and that's their, that's their right. And so something that we make sure to message to schools and teachers during Civics Week is that there are ways to do this in a school that's inclusive, and there's ways to do this in a school where you're asking the right questions and posting the right information so that the students who are eligible are getting the information they need to understand how important this is, but the students who aren't eligible are also not getting the message that like, you're not eligible to vote, so no civics for you. Like, this binder and like the resources we're giving to teachers is meant to provide lots of other resources and things to make sure everyone understands that they can be civically engaged whether or not they can vote, right? You're all civically engaged, some of you aren't old enough to vote yet, right?
I'm gonna actually